Alrighty, so what is the origin of marriage and partners, and why was love never a part of it? So, why is this important, and how can you use this? So, first off, this is going to be really controversial, but love and marriage were never actually supposed to be together in the first place. So, the feeling that you have of love is fleeting, which is called eros. We'll get into that eventually, or between eros and philia. And it does not last forever. It's sort of like lust, but it lasts for months or weeks. And caring for someone may last forever until you're dead. But the excitement which comes from first loving someone is fleeting and temporary. This feeling dies quite quickly. Now, the history and origin of marriage was never about love, and somehow it has been lost to time and was forgotten. I don't really hear too many people talk about this. So a lot of people, like, they're talking about like love and relationships and stuff and like marriage and all that, right? I have heard almost none of them say that love and marriage are not supposed to be in the same category. And in my view, in some sense, they actually aren't supposed to be in the same category. And history says the exact same thing, by the way, because in my view, by the way, a lot of my ideas are not actually ever my own. They're usually histories. All I do is I just follow history and I see what does work and what doesn't work. In my view, our current system doesn't work, so clearly something's wrong, right? And also, I explain it in my relationship playlist on how women work and stuff. Well, if you're interested in all that stuff, go check that out. Now, finding a partner for life is not about love. It's a contract right here. Marriage is a contract. It's pragma, which we'll get into eventually, of resources, lineage, and alliance. So, especially in the past anyways, when it comes to alliance of nations or tribes, this is what marriage was about. Now, this means that the contract of love is temporary, of what we would call eros, is temporary, and the contract of marriage, or pragma, is permanent, not about your feelings. So marriage is not about feelings. Marriage is about a contract for resources, lineage, and alliance. Before, anyways, it was about alliance. But now we would probably just say it's resources and lineage. If it's in terms of alliance, it's more so for those who are in power and who have status. Now, divorce rates and unsatisfaction in marriages today, it ain't for no reason. And it's because the underlying concept and understanding of marriage itself is misunderstood. Combined with feminism and a huge list of other factors, which I've covered in my previous playlist, and I've made videos in my channel, as I've mentioned, this will, in my opinion, only continue to get worse. Birth rates will only continue to go down even further. Divorce rates will either go stagnant, in my view, or they will go up. I don't think that they're going to go down. If they are going down, if divorce rates are going down, it's probably because official divorces are staying stagnant. But the partners themselves are separated. So there's a lot of people that I know of who are not actually divorced, but they are clearly separated. Like, they are not interacting anymore. The husband and the wife are not interacting with each other. So now, a clarification of semantics because of language. So you might say, why exactly did I put a picture of 1984 George Orwell here? Well, it's because in George Orwell's book, 1984, there's something called Newspeak. And Newspeak, the thing with Newspeak is it makes it difficult to rebel, or difficult to think of freedom, I guess you could say in this case. So because of this is sort of similar to English. Now, I'm not saying English is Newspeak, but I'm saying English is really bad when it comes to semantics, and it lumps everything into the word of one thing, which is love. It's really stupid. So English really only has two ways to describe affection, and it throws it all into that one word of love. It doesn't describe the different kinds of love, for instance, between family, marriage, lust. Honestly, English is terrible at this. And because of this, we will use Greek words to describe different kinds of love, because English sucks. And I will use these words throughout the video, and I will refer to them, but every single time I do refer to them, I will also put, for instance, the bolded part. So if it says familial love, self-love, playful love, romantic, passionate love, right? I'll put all of those throughout the video just so we can sort of understand where it's going. So first is storage. By the way, before I start, all of these are actually in order of what a human is supposed to experience. And if they don't experience it basically in this order, things get kind of like messed up, I guess you could say. And and certain loves or certain kinds of love become far more desired, especially eros and ludus become extremely desired. And then like philia becomes neglected, there's a lot of problems today in my view. But anyways, let's get to it. So the first kind of love is storge, so familial love. This means that parental care and affection of the child, and this teaches safety and trust in the early days of the child. It's really important. The second one is, we're going to call it philotia, self-love. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I'm going to pronounce it like that. So you must have self-acceptance. I've covered this in my previous video of religion. Religion is part of this, so you must have some form of self-acceptance. In this case, I call it acceptance itself, not self-acceptance, but self-acceptance and acceptance sort of are intertwined. It's not quite the same thing, but they do link together at the very least. The third kind of love is ludus and playful love. So this is basically flirtatious, curiosity, excitement, and teasing, and the feeling of being desired. So if you find somebody cute and then they also find you cute, and then you sort of like talk, and then you're flirting with each other and teasing each other, right? This sort of a thing. This is usually what's called puppy love. This is ludus. The fourth kind of love is eros, and this is the honeymoon phase. Romantic, passionate love, the intense, consuming phase of love. And usually this is where all the sex happens. The fifth kind of love is philia. So this is deep friendship. Now, the thing is, this is a really interesting thing. With philia can happen both with friends, so it could be platonic, or philia can be with an intimate partner. But usually you don't actually experience philia with an intimate partner until eros has died down. So that's sort of an interesting thing. So often afterwards it's established that there is mutual respect and trust. So like I said, either with the intimate partner that you have, or it's platonic with like just a regular friend. And the sixth kind of love is pragma. Now this is basically the contract phase of what we would call marriage in this case, where love becomes a contract and it's about being sustained. It's all about resources, and it's all about taking care of the child, right? And the seventh kind of love is agape, unconditional selfless love. This is compassion for all life, including the divine. It is a state of being rather than an emotion. So this is more so along the lines of divine, but I guess you could call it like maybe euphoric, maybe would be a good word for it. Sort of like a euphoric kind of feeling. So the history of marriage. First, it starts off, where does marriage start? Well, it starts off with tribal groups before 10,000 BC. This is basically hunters. This is before civilization, by the way, and before the agricultural revolution, because the agricultural revolution is actually what caused civilization to occur in the first place. So humans lived in about 150 to 25 people, and mating relationships were done for pair bonding. Men and women would cooperate for food sharing, protection, and raising offspring. And the reason is because human offspring are helpless for quite a while once they are born. Very, very long time. As you can see here, marriage in this case was sort of like a verbal contract. That's why I had the word verbal right there. And they were sharing resources. In this case, meat, right? They're hunters. And it could also be used from tribe to tribe. So for instance, the marriage-like bonds, or pragma, the contract phase, were all about exchanging resources, meat as an example, because this is a giant resource back in hunter times, labor, and allies. They would also help prevent conflict of external groups. This is incredibly important because that's actually one of the huge reasons behind why marriage exists in the first place, by turning outsiders into relatives, or in this case we will call it philia, the deep friendship sort of kind of love. As women of one tribe marrying into another solidifies the alliance. In this case, it turns that other group of people who your, for instance, daughter married into, more so along the lines of philia. So you become closer with them because they're taking care of your daughter and they're providing for your daughter and all this stuff, right? And it's your daughter, so you care about your daughter, right? Love itself was the byproduct. It was not the goal of the relationship itself. And this is going to be pretty important when we come to civilization. So what about marriage in ancient civilization? So from 4000 BC to 500 AD, marriage became a contract legally as the start of the agriculture revolution created property and inheritance. And marriage was all about who could claim the land, the wealth, and the children. So marriage, in this case, or pragma, the contract phase, as I've mentioned before, was economic and a legal institution. And it was all about securing family alliances or inheritance. Love was never a part of marriage. Never. In every single civilization, by the way, during this time. Literally. Not even Greece. Okay, this was not part of marriage. They expressed this another way. Now, while ancient civilizations showed some necessity for experiencing the feeling of love, in this case we'll call it eros, the eros sort of love, or ludus, like Greece having emotional companionship being sought of outside of marriage, such as courtesans, male or female, literally some, because some guys were into other guys as well, right? It's a sort of a thing, I guess. It was because they saw eros, the romantic, passionate love, as dangerous to order of family and of civilization. They saw love itself. Love is dangerous to order. In this case, it means it's destabilizing. Love can be very destabilizing. And there's reasons why. The Greeks believed that eros made people act bad in three main ways. First, eros, or ludus in this case, can make people ignore reason and act impulsively. Yeah, I think we could see that quite often, especially today. The same thing applies to today as well. The second thing is it defies social norms or class boundaries. So this feeling of eros or ludus will help you defy social norms or class boundaries, and you'll act like a complete lunatic sometimes. Or class boundaries in this case. Yeah, sort of. Back then there was a lot more class boundaries. Today there's less so sort of class boundaries. I guess you could say the only real class boundary is like being homeless and then walking into like a steak restaurant, right? That sort of a thing, like a really high-end steak restaurant. And the third reason why Greeks believed eros made people act really badly is because it would prioritize private emotion over the public duty. And marriage, in this sense, was sort of actually viewed as a public duty, and it was a little bit in the divine sense as well. Now, what exactly was the true purpose of a mistress, and why did they exist in history? Mistresses were about the man being able to feel passionate love, in this case, eros and ludus, and not about feeling philia, deep friendship, or pragma. This deep friendship, philia, and pragma were associated with the person who they were married with, not ludus and eros. The person that they were married with, they were not feeling ludus and eros with. It was more so like a benefit if they ever did. But even then, it was seen as destabilizing. Now, this is how love was seen throughout history. And there's a reason why men had multiple wives throughout history in most civilizations. So, like I said before, that list of feeling love in all those different cycles, I guess you could say. It starts with ludus, playful love, and then turns into eros, romantic love, and then into philia, and then into pragma. Now, why was the man the only one with multiple partners? Why not the woman then in this case? There are two main reasons why women didn't have multiple partners back then. The first main reason was because, simply put, a difference in biology. Men and women are just different. Men can have multiple children in the span of a week, and women can only rear one at a time. The second reason why is because of legitimacy of heirs. This one is probably the biggest reason, actually. An illegitimate heir often led to literal wars being caused on repeat. This happened so many times in China. This also happened in England. I mean, this happened throughout history. Illegitimate heirs, bastard sons in this case, happened throughout history. And they undermined the certainty of property, lineage, and power, and occurred nonstop in world history. So the real reason why mistresses existed was for men, basically, simply put, to feel eros and to feel ludus, because those were lacking, and marriage was all about philia and pragma. So what about marriage in the Middle Ages? Exactly the same thing, actually. From 500 to 1500 AD, Rome collapses, the church becomes the central authority on morality, and it is declared that marriage is a sacrament, as we can see in our top picture right here, and it makes it holy and what we would call, quote-unquote, indestructible. Marriages, which is why back then especially, getting a divorce was a no-no, big no-no. Marriages arranged for land, dowries, and alliance. And if you were a peasant, it provided economic stability, sharing, livestock, labor, and childcare. Now, love was seen as a temptation and more in line with poetry and was being fantasy and fictionalized. And marriage was all about duty. So even though some civilizations had multiple wives, like Africa and Asia, those sort of areas, one wife was normalized in Christian Europe, but mistresses were still normal. Basically, there was only one wife allowed by law, but mistresses, or some way to express eros, always existed, or ludus in this case. Now, what about Enlightenment and the Industrial Age? Well, the Enlightenment era, 16 to 1700s, was when reason, science, and individual freedom was prioritized over tradition and dogma. They believed that marriage should be a voluntary social contract amongst individuals, and both partners had rights. Happiness was seen as a legitimate goal and not self-indulgent. So as we can see right here, this is the whole point of marriage. Yay, being happy, right? And it's like basically sort of defying authority around this point as well. And this is around the time of the Constitution and all this other stuff that started to happen, the American experiment, all this started to happen at around one time, which is sort of interesting. Then Romanticism in the 17 to 1800s, where a lot of other things were happening, by the way, like the American experiment and just defying authority as a general rule, happened where love was seen as sacred and it was glorified as pure and moral. And the middle class moral code made mistresses seen as immoral or decadent. So they were not seen publicly often. But once again, they do still exist, just in a different form. The purpose of marriage was to be seen shifting from duty to happiness, and the combination of eros, philia, and pragma were all supposed to be linked together, rather than separating ludus and eros from philia and pragma. So you were supposed to have all of them in one. What are the odds of that happening? I'll tell you, it's probably slim to none, by the way. So why exactly is the modern era and marriage today completely shit, and it sucks? So there are multiple reasons why marriage sucks today. I cover in the relationship playlist. If you want to go check that out, go check it out. I explain everything there. You can learn so much there about why exactly. But I will say both men and women are at fault here. But one of the problems is a lack of understanding of the true purpose of marriage itself. The main reason is because the underlying principle behind why marriage exists in the first place and the purpose of that marriage is because of producing heirs, preserving family property, forging alliances, and maintaining civic order. This is not about eros. Marriage is not about eros. It's about pragma and philia. So as we can see right here, most divorces are initiated by women. And what is this picture right here? This is basically saying marriage is not about love. This is not about love. It's a contract. So there's a pretty good reason why polyamory is starting to come about once again today. People always wanted to experience eros and ludus, but are sadly linking them together with pragma, thinking they are supposed to be the same thing. They're not the same thing, okay? There's different forms of love, and sadly, the English language lumps it all into one word. And that is probably why, that's I think one of the huge reasons why actually people are so confused. Just start using Greek words for explaining love, like those 7 Greek words, and I think this problem will go down significantly, like much, much more. And if they learn the history and origin of how marriage and love works as well, because I think history is a pretty important teacher in some instances. So what do I personally think about this? So first off, I think sleeping around on both sides, actually, both men and women sleeping around, are inevitable, and they're bound to happen. You can't stop it. It's happened since the dawn of history, and it continues to happen today. Now, this can go three ways, and in my view, it's mostly probably going down the second way, but it could go down the second way, and I would probably say the first way, but more so the second way. So first off, it can either go down one, men and women can sleep around freely, making legitimacy unknown and leading to pure freedom, but maximum potential chaos in society. So this is, surprise, surprise, actually already kind of common today. And you might say, what are you talking about? I'm talking about paternity fraud. So this is actually way more common today than you think. And there's a reason why in France and certain societies, testing to see whether or not the kid is yours is illegal. Suspicious, huh? The reason is because this has been going and happening for quite a while. So yeah, because you've introduced the ability, I guess you could say, of women sort of realizing that there's different kinds of love in this case, and they will find, for instance, their pragma or philia with one guy, and then their ludus and eros with another guy, right? So this sort of makes legitimacy unknown. And in the United States, paternity tests are done. A lot of men have done like paternity tests, and a lot of men have figured out child ain't mine, and then they get really pissed and stuff. So this is the one way it can go down. The second way is men can sleep around and women cannot. Now this secures legitimacy and it prevents more chaos from occurring, sort of today, but it does limit freedom, the freedom of the woman. More specifically, it limits the woman from experiencing ludus and eros continually, whereas men can continually experience it themselves. And the third way it can go down is men and women cannot sleep around freely and are bound to one another as we have today, which is a complete failure because this third one always just reverts to the first one. And this leads to maximum divorce rates and unsatisfaction in so many ways and restricting freedom. Now, because of both the biology of men and women being completely different and men and women not being equal, I personally think that it will go down route 2, which is what is reoccurring today in society. This is starting to happen and become much more common. So, for instance, this could be a man, like a very famous man, marrying over and over again, in and out of marriages, marriage, divorce, and sleeping around with women, getting them pregnant, right, having kids. I can think of one person who owns Tesla who sort of does this, right? As one example. But there's many other people, like Andrew Tate, for instance. I would say a lot of people hate Andrew Tate, but honestly, I think Andrew Tate has a pretty good understanding when it comes to like the different kinds of love, because it's pretty obvious there are different kinds of love. In my view, this is like a no-brainer, and you can't conflate ludus and eros with pragma and philia. Like, it makes no sense. So sure, Andrew Tate has multiple wives. I would say more so this, as a man, this just helps with genetic diversity, which is like what all men want, by the way. Any men who says they don't wish for multiple wives, or they don't wish for that sort of a thing, I would say they're lying. I wouldn't say they don't wish for multiple wives. More so, they don't wish for multiple people to experience ludus and eros with. Any man who says they don't wish that is completely lying. Every man wishes that. It's just part of biology. That's just the way it is. So yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you want to know more about all this stuff, by the way, go check out the relationship playlist. It explains a whole lot more, both on how men and women are supposed to act, which I think they are both acting completely out of line, I guess you could say, in this case. And this is what leads to so many problems in so many relationships today. So anyways, go check out the relationship playlist if you're interested in any more videos. Please let me know down in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below. It really does help the channel grow. And yeah, once again, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.